Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanishalaakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. In this session, we will be discussing from the 20th verse of the 11th chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This 11th chapter is entitled Lord Krishna's Entrance into Dwaraka. That's the description given here. Nata Nartaka Gandharvaha Sutamagadha Vandinaha Gayanti Chottama Shloka Charitani Adbhutani Cha. The meaning of this verse is: expert dramatists, artists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, and learned speakers all gave their respective contributions, being inspired by the superhuman pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Thus they proceeded on and on. So Krishna was received by all types of citizens of Dwarka Dhama, Dwarka city. So among the citizens there were these expert dramatists, artists, singers, historians, all of them. So Prabhupada explains in the purport, it appears that 5,000 years ago the society also needed the services of dramatists, artists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists, public speakers, etc. Dancers, singers and dramatic artists mostly hail from the Shudra community, whereas the learned historians, genealogists and public speakers hail from the Brahmana community. All of them belong to a particular caste and they became so trained in their respective families. Such dramatists, dancers, singers, historians, genealogists and public speakers would dwell on the subject of the Lord's superhuman activities in different ages and millenniums, and not on ordinary events. This is the Vedic culture. In the Vedic culture, everything is centered around Krishna and Krishna's divine nature, Krishna's divine activities, the activities of Krishna's incarnations, Krishna's pure devotees. And that's the way the whole society becomes spiritualized. Now Srila Prabhupada explains, very importantly we should understand that these descriptions of the Lord's superhuman activities in different ages and millenniums were not necessarily arranged in chronological order. All the Puranas are historical facts described only in relation with the Supreme Lord in different ages and times, as well as on different planets also. We do not find any chronological order in these descriptions in the Puranas. The modern historians therefore cannot catch up the link, and thus they unauthoritatively remark that the Puranas are all imaginary stories only. You see, just because it is not chronologically arranged, or because it is describing events of the Supreme Lord which are extraordinary, beyond conception of the human being of the modern day. So they say, oh, all these stories in the Puranas are all fiction, imaginary stories. That's what they dismiss. They have coined a term called mythology. Mythology means, it is derived from the word myth. Myth means something which is not a fact. It is not true. But the truth is that all the stories in the Puranas are factual, historical narrations. So Prabhupada says further in the purport, even 100 years ago in India, all dramatic performances were centered around the superhuman activities of the Supreme Lord. I remember when I was a primary school student, one of the famous cinemas was Sampurna Ramayana. And all of you are aware that on the TV serial there was this Mahabharata. It was very nicely produced by famous TV program producers, and it was a very popular and super hit program. So about 100 years back, there used to be only performances, whether it is drama or dance or any art form, including cinema and theatre, simply centered around the superhuman activities of the Supreme Lord Krishna. The common people would be verily entertained by the performance of dramas and yatra parties, who played wonderfully on the superhuman activities of the Lord. And thus, even the illiterate agriculturist would be a participant in knowledge of Vedic literature despite a considerable lack of academic qualifications. So many people in the villages, they'll be engaged in some simple occupation like potters, carpenters, the laborers in the agricultural field. They don't go to a Gurukul to study the Vedas formally. But that does not mean they are ignorant about the Vedic knowledge. They are educated by simply participating in hearing the wonderful descriptions of Krishna's pastimes by these dramatists, by the historians, by the reciters of the Puranas, by the singers. In this way, they also become enlightened in Vedic knowledge. Therefore, among Vaishnavas, the Puranas are counted among the Vedic literature, because the Puranas are just describing everything in connection with Krishna. So Puranas are not outside the scope of the Vedas. The Mayavadis, they reject the Puranas as not belonging to the original Vedas. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport here, therefore expert players in drama, dance, singing and speaking are required for the spiritual enlightenment of the common man. For the enlightenment of the common man, there is no need to endeavor to give them formal education. Simply by performing drama or having a dance performance centered around the wonderful pastimes of Lord Krishna and his incarnations and his pure devotees' activities, the common people get enlightened in this spiritual subject matter. So this is the way of spiritualizing society. Instead of having some dance performance which is not connected with Krishna consciousness, which may entertain people, but it doesn't help to spiritualize people's consciousness. So nowadays the cinema and even the even the dance performances, ball dance and rock and roll dance and all kinds of music and cinema and all that centered around some mundane subject matter or mundane fiction, novel. That's all actually not at all spiritually beneficial, neither it is able to educate the common people. So whereas the performance of drama, dance and the narration of the historical narrations centered around the superhuman activities of Krishna or his incarnations or his pure devotees, that will enlighten the common people, and simultaneously it will be entertaining for them also. Because the narrations of Krishna's pastimes are extraordinary activities which will interest any person. There is so much of heroic deeds performed by Krishna in displaying his pastimes when he appears in this world. And these are factual. Krishna comes to subdue the asuras when the asuras give unnecessary trouble to Krishna's devotees. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkrita. So Krishna actually engages in such a fight against the asuras. But the descriptions in the Puranas about Krishna's superhuman activities are very, very attractive. Instead of watching some cinema where some so-called hero engages in some so-called fighting with some villain, which is not really true because the hero doesn't have the strength to fight against the villain. It is simply a show of fighting. Whereas when the Supreme Lord comes to this material world, incarnates in this material world, he actually subdues these asuras who become powerful and harass the ordinary citizens. So it is an actual fight. It is not a show, merely a show, Krishna fighting against Kamsa or Krishna fighting against the different demons, Bakasura and Gardhabasura, all these demons who appeared, Vatsasura. Krishna actually killed them. And of course, Krishna's killing is also beneficial for these asuras because they are purified and they are delivered from suffering in hell. They are delivered because they go on committing sinful activities. So it's Krishna's mercy. So these descriptions, the wonderful activities of Krishna described in the Puranas, are worth hearing because simply by hearing such activities, anyone can become spiritualized in their consciousness. They can become purified. They can become enlightened, spiritually enlightened, and that's the only thing that's required for a human being to achieve all perfection. In fact, material education is useless as regards ultimate liberation. It may be helpful for some, for the sake of earning a livelihood, may be helpful. But as far as spiritual enlightenment is concerned, material subject matter is useless. Studying material subject matter is useless. So therefore, such performances by the dramatists, by the singers, which is centered around Krishna's superhuman activities, are spiritually beneficial for everyone, all classes of people. and therefore such things should be encouraged in society. I'll stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.